I'm going to share with you the second More Than Books book that we have chosen for this half term. It is a classic, really, Z for Zachariah by Robert O'Brien. I know I said in my initial send around that this is one of the ones that I read as a child, which you'll think is about 400 years ago, and probably was. Early 80s, but it is absolutely brilliant, and I actually think it's fairly timeless. I think there's been a recent remake film wise, which is only a 12, so if you are 12 or above you can watch that to back it up, and apparently very well done. I haven't watched it yet, but it is you know, I always think with these things, it's if there is a film or something similar to back up your own imagination, then do it, absolutely. Robert O'Brien actually didn't finish this book himself, and it was quite interesting. He died before he'd finished writing it, so his wife finished it for him, and I think it's quite interesting when you get towards the end, the last couple of chapters, to see whether or not you can see a slightly different style. He also wrote another one of my favourites when I was just thinking about our reciprocal reading and our prior knowledge. I read this in primary school, and that really was 100 years ago. Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim. Now, I have suggested this to a few year 7s just because it's the most beautifully written book, and I just love the story. Mrs. Frisby rescuing the lab rats. So O'Brien writes about, you know, interesting subject matters. This one, Z for Zachariah, is based on after an imaginary World War III, and when I was growing up, that was something that was actually quite topical, quite a concern. You know, we had the Cold War and all those kinds of things. If you're interested in the history of that, it was quite a real concern, and it focuses around a 16-year-old girl who's in a post-apocalyptic world. She thinks she's the only person left, and it then transpires that she isn't. But you know, even looking at the front cover, so when you look at this, you've got kind of this nuclear symbol, which I think is very effective. That darkness, also really effective. You know, Z for Zachariah, when I was thinking about the title of that, when you're thinking about the alphabet, you know, the alphabet that the police use, they always have a you know, Alpha, Bravo, those kinds of things. And I was thinking about this idea of Z being the last letter of the alphabet. You know, is he connecting that name with the last person on Earth? Now, we know that, ironically, the central character is called Anne. Anne is one of the first letters. A is one of, obviously not Anne's the first letter. A is one of the first letters of the alphabet. So my mind just works that way, where I'm thinking, okay, why has he chosen that title? That's really interesting. Z being the last, what am I going to be encountering inside the book? The blurb on the back: I'm afraid someone is coming. Anne Burden has been living alone in a valley for over a year, fearing she's the only survivor of a devastating nuclear war. Then Mr. Loomis, a scientist in a radiation-proof suit, turns up. And honestly, that is one of the most frightening bits of the film. And bearing in mind, I was probably 11, 12 when I saw it, is when he appears out of the mist in this radiation suit. And she's a 16-year-old completely by herself. So yeah. I mean, if you like that kind of thing, you will absolutely love it, I promise you. Mr. Loomis's behaviour towards her becomes increasingly threatening. A terrifying battle of wills ensues between a girl and the last man on Earth. So again, referring to this Z for Zachariah, is she the last girl on Earth? Is he the last man on Earth? It feels like it might be a really, really negative, miserable book, but actually it's really exciting, and the end is pretty positive. But I'll let you choose it and get that far. So I'll read you the opening, and I'll do what I would normally do and just talk through my thoughts as we go. It's written in diary form. Again, it's quite interesting from that point of view. Chapter 1, May the 20th. I am afraid someone is coming. That is, I think someone is coming, though I'm not sure, and I pray that I am wrong. I went into the church and prayed all this morning. I sprinkled water in front of the altar and put some flowers on it, violets and dogwood. Now, I don't know what dogwood is. I would then go and maybe look that up or ask somebody. But there is smoke. For 3 days there has been smoke, not like the time before. That time last year, it rose in a great cloud a long way away and stayed in the sky for 2 weeks. Now here I assume she's referring to those familiar pictures that we see of nuclear, hydrogen bombs, that familiar mushroom cloud. But again, that's left to our imagination at this stage. A forest fire in the dead woods, and then it rained and the smoke stopped. But this time it's a thin column, like a pole, not very high. And the column has come 3 times, each time in the late afternoon. At night I cannot see it, and in the morning it is gone. But each afternoon it comes again, and it is nearer. At first it was behind Claypole Ridge, and I could see only the top of it, the smallest smudge, and I thought it was a cloud, except that it was too grey, the wrong colour, and then I thought, there are no clouds anywhere else. I got the binoculars and saw that it was narrow and straight. It was smoke from a small fire. When we used to go into the truck, Claypole Ridge was 15 miles, although it looks closer, and the smoke was coming from behind that. Beyond Claypole Ridge is Ogden Town, about 10 miles further, but there is no one left alive in Ogden Town. I know because after the war ended and all the telephones went dead, my father, my brother Joseph and cousin David went in the truck to find out what was happening, and the first place they went was Ogden Town. She seems very matter-of-fact at this stage, which is quite interesting to me. It's obviously happened quite a time ago, and she's talking about it being a year ago, and therefore I feel like from her perspective a lot of the emotion has been taken out of it. She seems quite factual about what's going on. They went early in the morning. Joseph and David were really excited, but Father looked serious. When they came back it was dark. Mother had been worrying they took so long, so we were glad to see truck lights finally coming over Burden Hill 6 miles away. They looked like beacons. They were the only lights anywhere except in the house. No other cars had come down all day. We knew it was the truck because one of the lights, the left one, always blinked when it went over a bump. It came up to the house and they got out. The boys weren't excited anymore. They looked scared, and my father looked sick. Maybe he was beginning to be sick, but mainly I think he was distressed. My mother looked at him as he climbed down. What did you find? He said, bodies. Just bodies, they're all dead. All. We went inside the house where the lamps were lit, 2 boys following, not saying anything. My father sat down. Terrible, he said, and again. Terrible, terrible. We drove around looking. We blew the horn. Then we went to the church and rang the bell. You can hear it 5 miles away. We waited for 2 hours, but nobody came. I went into a couple of houses, the Joneses, the Peters. They were all in there, all dead. There were dead birds all over the street. My brother Joseph began to cry. He was 14, I think. I hadn't heard him cry for 6 years. So that's the first entry. And again, nice simple language. I don't think there's anything overcomplicated. I think it's presented sensitively from a child's point of view, and actually what then happens is this building of suspense. So we get a little bit of more of the narrative of when her parents are around, and then we dive into what happens when she's left alone, and then we leap back to this idea of the column and the smoke. So what I will do is I will read on. I will pick a couple more little bits, and I think I'll read the ending to you in the next video just so that you can see it's not all doom and gloom, I promise you.